Achtung, Cthulhu 2D20 is a tabletop RPG by Modiphius and has been around now since 2022, but has been previously published under different rule sets in the past, such as for Fate and Savage Worlds. The core 2D20 version comes as 2 books, the Player's Guide and Game Master's Guide, both of which I've reviewed on this channel. Since those reviews, Modiphius has been releasing a steady stream of content for the game, mostly in the form of short missions in digital format, but occasionally a full book supplement. Most recently, they have released a starter set box, which is a bit different from their quick start. They sent me this box, and in this video, I want to open it with you and walk you through the first of 3 acts in the sample adventure. I'll skip to the chase here and just tell you that I really think companies like Modiphius, which have these big teams of professionals who are clearly dedicated to making products for people who play and want to play their games, has really sort of perfected the art of the starter set box. Starter set boxes have been around since the very beginning of the hobby, but that doesn't mean that they've all been collectively getting better over the decades. It's just that when a company like Modiphius really pays attention to what new players and GMs need from a new game, you get a boxed set that just hits all the marks. It really had me wondering, where do you even go from here? As in, how can you make a starter box set even better than this? I'll show you what I mean. But first, let's take a look at the sponsor for this video, which isn't Modiphius, believe it or not. It's Agents of Fate. Agents of Fate is a groundbreaking tabletop role-playing game experience now live on Kickstarter. In this innovative game, players are assigned secret victory conditions by the operator, adding layers of complexity and intrigue to every session. These objectives often overlap or conflict with other players' goals, creating a dynamic landscape of alliances and betrayals. The game also heavily utilizes a flashback system that empowers players to rewrite history on the fly, seize opportunities that were once missed, alter the course of events, and shape the narrative to your advantage. Creative adaptability is key as players navigate through a world where the past is not set in stone. Immerse yourself in the improvisational nature of character conflict and combat. With each encounter, players must think quickly and strategically, embracing the chaos to emerge victorious. The game thrives on spontaneity, offering a thrilling and unpredictable experience every time. Delve into a world filled with dozens of pre-written characters and captivating missions. Whether you're unraveling conspiracies or manipulating events from the shadows, Agents of Fate provides a rich tapestry of stories waiting to be explored. Experience the visually stunning art direction inspired by The World Ends With You, with nods to cinematic masterpieces like John Wick, Knives Out, and Bullet Train. Back Agents of Fate now on Kickstarter and become an agent of change in this innovative tabletop RPG. Link is below. Alright, back to the Achtung Cthulhu Starter Set. So a lot of features of the Achtung Cthulhu 2D20 starter set box are high quality, but it's the little things that make this a remarkable box set. Sure, you get the high quality thick cardstock for the box itself, but the inside of the box has GM screen cheat sheet material printed in it, so the box doubles as a little GM guide. The other half of the box has more rules as well. The contents include a staple-bound 60-page booklet containing the sample adventure scenario. Just a fair warning here, I'm going to do a detailed walkthrough of the first of the 3 acts in this scenario. I won't be discussing the second and third acts. The paper quality is particularly nice in these booklets. They feel like deluxe semi-gloss magazine pages, but I have to say, if you're the type of person who has no qualms about highlighting and writing in these booklets, then you're going to have a problem using a conventional highlighter or ballpoint pen on this semi-glossy paper. Basically, the ink from those devices don't really soak into the paper. I had to resort to using a permanent marker to make my highlights. Just a minor note there. The second booklet contains the basic rules of the game. This is one of my favorite aspects of the whole set because it is aggressive in paring down the game's rules, which originally come in the form of 2 books totaling around 550 pages or something. The total number of pages containing rules in this booklet is 13. As much as I loved reading the 2 core books and reviewing them, it was this right here which really made me want to run the game. I'll go over the actual basic rules of this game in a minute when we run through the first act. Here's another really nice touch that I don't think I've seen in other starter sets. A 2-page reference sheet for each player. Not just 1 or 2 of them, but 6. This box set is dead focused on getting everyone to learn the rules of this game. The next thing you get are 6 pre-generated characters on double-sided sheets. These pre-gens are cited in the example adventure. If you don't have the core rules, then you can't generate your own character, but this is common practice with starter sets. I always wonder about these nice character sheets and if there are people out there who just hand out the originals to be marked up and used once. I'm all for highlighting a rules booklet, but I'd never want to write on primo character sheets like these. Then you get a couple of sheets of round cardboard tokens. They include identical artwork on both sides for some of the tokens, like the pre-gens and icons, but the enemy and monster tokens actually have different art on each side, which means if you're storing these in a bag, you might have a hard time quickly finding the token you're looking for, since you'll have to check both sides of most of them until you find it. There are 3 huge maps made of nice, thick matte paper. The first is an area where you'll have your first encounter in the scenario. On the other side is the village that you're asked to infiltrate in the first act. The next map shows an enemy camp, and on the back is a farm where some shenanigans take place. The final map contains a network of tunnels, and on the back, a huge action set piece. Finally, there's a set of dice containing 2 D20s, naturally, and 4 specialty D6s. When I was recording this unboxing, my bad lighting didn't reveal to me just how cool this dice set was. I have a previous set from this game that Modiphius calls their Black Sun set, and it's just plain white on black. But this set that comes with the starter box is actually a dark translucent green that I find really appealing. They're calling these the limited edition Elder Sign dice. And in fact, instead of a skull icon on the one for the D20, you get the infamous Elder Sign, which is cool. Alright, so what I want to do in this video is walk you through how the creators actually present and teach the game through the sample adventure, which is called Among the Wolves. As mentioned, it's an adventure composed of 3 acts that could probably be played in one game session, and I'm only going to show you the first act, and obviously spoil the relatively minor surprise that it contains. My 2 takeaways from this first act are: 1, it teaches the game really effectively, and 2, it really drew me in and made me want to run this game. Act 1 starts 4 players off as Alex Kelly, Mike Tiedemann, Lula Brett, and Kyla Cannon, members of a British military detachment sent to the town of Dunkirk in May of 1940. If you haven't seen the movie Dunkirk or read about it in the history books, it's one of the many incredible stories from World War II. In this case, where 338,000 British and French troops were trapped against the coastline by Nazi forces, and the only way they were actually able to escape was by a flotilla of British boats and ships, most of them civilian ships. It was a cool thing, but this act is not about that flotilla. Your PCs are on the line, still awaiting rescue, and the first thing you hear is your commanding officer, Lieutenant Dan Atterbury, ordering you to create a barrier around your position in town. And this is actually your first chance to throw dice and learn the mechanics. In order to build up a sandbag fortification, all players are asked to roll a coordination plus tactics skill test with a difficulty of 1. So, for example, Alex Kelly has a coordination attribute of 9 and a tactics rating of 4. So that player's target number is 13. The player rolls 2 d20s, and the dice which come up at or below the target number is considered a success. Since the difficulty of the test is 1, then only 1 success is required. If there were any extra successes rolled, those are banked as momentum, a meta point pool that can be spent by anyone in the party. Momentum is actually a big deal in 2d20 games because it's used constantly to add more d20s to a roll, increase special effects on an attack, gain information, and even change the reality of a scene. As far as this sandbag fortification, if half the party or more succeeds the roll, then the cover has a value of 2, and if not, then it has a value of 1. Cover reduces incoming damage or stress from successful attacks. But let's say that one of the players rolls a 20. That's a bad thing in this game since it uses a roll under dice paradigm for the most part. A 20 creates a complication, which is a narrative problem that makes things hard for players. Or the GM could let the players forego a problem and instead bank 2 threat points. Threats are a meta currency that the GM actually uses to insert problems at the time of their choosing. This can come in many forms, including all the things that a PC can do with momentum, like add d20s to a check or change the reality of a scene. Let's think about the implication of that for a minute. In the game, both players and GM can spend meta points to change the reality of a scene. They're called truths. and they come in the form of a word or short phrase that can affect the difficulty rating of a check that relates to it in the scene. This really makes the game a bit of a hybrid between a traditional and a storytelling game in terms of its rule structure. Players at the table have the power and the agency to fundamentally change the scene a little. Not by a lot, usually, but by enough to really empower the players in a way you don't usually see in traditional RPGs. Anyway, right when the PCs finish building out the sandbag fortifications, the lieutenant gets shot in the head, and a couple of squads of Nazi soldiers come pouring in from the tree line at a distance. Combat in the game goes as follows. One of the PCs will take a turn, then one of the enemies, then a PC, then an enemy, back and forth until the round is done. There isn't an initiative system, actually. The GM just picks who goes first and who goes next. But yeah, each player gets a major action and a minor action. If they want to take a shot at a Nazi here, for example, that's a major action. So for example, using a revolver at close range would be a coordination plus fighting test with a difficulty of 1. Each weapon has an optimum range. So let's say our guy Alex Kelly takes a shot with a revolver. He has a coordination of 9 and a fighting of 3, which makes for a target of 12. But check this out. He has the focus of handgun, which is what we're using in this attack. So if the player rolls not just a 1, but a 1, 2, or even 3, then that is counted as a critical success, which is just considered 2 successes instead of 1. Let's roll it up, and let's spend a momentum to add a d20 to this roll. 3d20 gives us 1, 3, and 7. A 1 always counts as 2 successes. The 3 in this case counts as 2 successes because of the focus in handguns, and the 7 is a success as well because it's under the target number of 12. Now, despite having 5 successes, I still just roll damage from my handgun once. The 4 extra successes are banked as momentum points. My handgun has a damage rating of 5, so I will roll 5 challenge dice, which are the d6s. On my roll, a single bullet hole represents 1 stress inflicted, 2 bullet holes is 2 stress, blank is obviously nothing, and a skull icon is 1 stress plus 1 special effect. In this roll, I've inflicted 4 stress, but since the Nazi soldier has 2 armor, that stress is reduced to 2. I need to inflict 5 stress in order to create 1 injury. For low-level enemies like this soldier, 1 injury is all it takes to kill them. There is a 37mm cannon nearby, but it's broken. If the PC Lula Brett can fix it by rolling 3 successes on a coordination plus engineering check, then she can open fire with a weapon that has 7 challenge dice per hit. Or remember, players can spend a measly 2 momentum to change reality. So a player on a hit could say that they struck a grenade on the enemy's belt and blew up half his squad. That's just the way the game is designed. So with the Nazis here getting decimated, the GM will spend 2 of their own threat points to create a truth. This truth is that the remaining Nazis will retreat. Now, this is just what it says in the scenario book. I'm not sure why the GM needs to spend threat for something like this, since it's a change in the scene, but it's not really making things more challenging, unpredictable, or dangerous for the PCs. But anyway, the next thing that happens is that the PCs are reminded that they are carrying out important orders. And these orders are included in the booklet in 2 different places, but not actually printed out on a separate piece of paper like you often see in box sets. The gist of the telegram here is that whoever is next in line for command of the party needs to take that party along with 2 NPC privates and report to a beachfront cafe in town. It's also here that players can make a coordination plus medicine skill test with a difficulty of 2 to treat any injuries, with 1 additional injury treated per every 2 momentum spent. One note about momentum points is that you really don't want to hoard them over the course of a session because you will lose all unused momentum at the end of each session. So the PCs will make a short trek to this cafe in town, which houses a secret military field office in its basement. There you will be briefed by Lieutenant Archibald Strang, who has some very interesting papers on his desk. An insight plus observation test with difficulty 1 will reveal a distinctive logo. And eventually the PCs will come to find that Britain has formed an occult agency called Section M. This is the very first taste of the occult or supernatural in the scenario. The LT tells you that you have a new mission to head into German-occupied territory nearby and rendezvous with a field agent named Professor Richard Deadman, codenamed Arrow. All the party members get a backpack full of decent equipment, including, importantly, binoculars, and if they can succeed a difficulty 1 will plus persuasion test, the person giving them their equipment will give them a highly experimental pistol that silently puts the target to sleep with one hit using toxin-infused pellets. The third scene in Act 1 involves the PCs making their way across a village crawling with Nazis. The way they suggest the GM handle this is by having players roll a series of different skill tests, and as they succeed, sort of pushing their tokens along eastward from the British lines to the town square here. Even though this church down here is where you're supposed to meet that agent, the scenario demands that you railroad the players to the town square for this big final scene of the act. The town square is absolutely loaded with enemy soldiers, especially the 2 entrances, so the players are invited to come up with some creative way to make their way in, or at least find a place to observe what's going on in there. As they get close though, any stealth tests that they make are going to be opposed tests against the soldiers. Those work by having the player and the GM roll against a difficulty of 1. There are 4 possible outcomes to an opposed test, the most complex of which is if both rolls succeed. This scene presents an interesting problem for the GM because on one hand, you're supposed to make the players roll insight or reason plus observation tests to get some truths about what is transpiring in the town square, but on the other, as a GM, you really just want the players to know this stuff. It just helps with them being able to effectively participate in the story. And those truths are: there are 36 normal Nazi troops and about 108 black-clad Nazi troops wearing gas masks. Then there are officers of those mysterious black-clad troops, and they're wearing metal masks. And finally, 1 normal but high-ranking Nazi officer. More important information that a GM may or may not grant without having to roll is a conversation between this 1 mask-wearing officer who has glowing red eyes and the normal but high-ranking Nazi officer. The normal officer is yelling at the glowing red eyes occult officer about having searched the town of Dunkirk high and low for any signs of, quote, giant insects, bugs, or blue crystals, and he informs the other that the search is now over. At this point, the glowing red-eyed officer pulls out a gun and shoots the normal but high-ranking officer, and there is a huge ambush with secret machine gun nests popping out of nowhere, and all the masked black-clad Nazi soldiers kill all the regular Nazi soldiers. The sight is so shocking to the PCs that they will all have to make a will plus resilience test of difficulty 2, or suffer 4 dice worth of mental stress. And finally, with another insight plus observation difficulty 1 test, they can overhear the orders for the soldiers to scour the nearby area and kill any stragglers, which includes the PCs, of course. And that's the end of Act 1 of this sample scenario. It's meant to make up about an hour of gameplay, since you're expected to be able to play through all 3 acts in a single game session. Maybe it's because I really love the theme and setting of Achtung Cthulhu generally, but I just loved this opening act, both in the way that it slowly acclimates the players into what is ultimately a very deep and dark conspiratorial war happening alongside the public world war, but also in just how it teaches the mechanics of the game. It's really the ideal way to teach and to learn a rules system like this, as opposed to reading a 250-page player's handbook. And obviously, the scenario gets a lot deadlier and outlandish to the point of being ridiculously pulp, which is the very clear intention of this game generally, and it explores other mechanics as well, such as magic and how to handle major enemies called nemeses. The scenario goes to a lot of fun places. So here are my thoughts on the Achtung Cthulhu 2D20 starter set by Modiphius. More dice. I'm being a bit unfair here because starter sets almost never include more than 1 set of dice, but when you look at the contents of the box, the product is clearly assuming that you're going to sit at a physical table and play this game with 3, 4, maybe even 5 or 6 players, but you get only 1 set of dice. And the way that Modiphius sells their dice sets, you kind of need 2 sets minimum because you only get 2 D20s. Yet the game's mechanics often call for more than 2 on a roll. Same with the D6s, you get 4 of those, but you're rolling more than 4 at a time, a lot of the time. Too many gates to information. You can see even from Act 1 of the scenario that the authors put a lot of dice rolls between players and key information. This might be a way to keep the players rolling and feeling like they're earning details about a scene, but sometimes you just need to describe a scene to the players in full and maybe reserve dice rolls for more important, hard to accomplish tasks. No digital code. I think a really nice touch would have been to include a digital code in the box set for the PDFs of everything. I know that Modiphius has a very finely honed business model where they sell digital goods separately as well as versions for virtual tabletops and all that. But if I'm being honest about what I really wanted to see personally, it was having immediate access to the digital version so I could both have this box set in my physical collection as well as run it online without having to buy the product twice. Intent on teaching the game. I felt like the starter set didn't just go through the motions of being a starter set. It has all the trappings of one, but they went the extra mile by both adding 6 copies of a quick reference sheet and by paring down the rules in the basic rules booklet to just 13 pages. Everything works together especially well to get new players and GMs on board. Quality paper and presentation. I'm lumping the high paper quality with the top-notch layout and graphic design because it almost goes without saying. Actually, I shouldn't take all those things for granted, especially the paper quality of the box, the booklets, and the maps. Modiphius could at any point now decide to save on production costs and start using cheaper paper, but they haven't done that yet, and it's nice. Super meta for max fun. I didn't mention it in this video, but there's actually a third meta currency in this game, one that bends the reality of a scene even further than momentum and threats. It's called fortune points, and PCs start a mission with 3 of them each. You can only spend 1 per scene, and you can use them to instantly buy a critical success, a reroll, add a major action to your turn, avoid defeat, or of course just change reality in some major way. If you consider momentum, threats, and fortune points as a whole, what you're seeing is a game that is riddled with meta-narrative options. Most games have a bit of wiggle room in terms of meta currency, but this game takes it to a new level. And of course, the design goal is to empower everyone at the table to tweak scenes and moments in the direction they want them to go. This comes at the cost of subverting or even disregarding dice rolls in a lot of cases. But I don't like being a slave to dice rolls personally, so I like this approach. I don't know how you can make this box set significantly better besides throwing in more dice. It really sets a high standard by aggressively trying to teach you the game. I found the shorter rules and the quick references so appealing compared to the 2 core rulebooks in terms of information load. If you're going to start playing this game, start with this box. Let me know in the comments if you've had any experience playing or running this game. I'd love to hear about it. I've left links below for everything. Thanks for watching. See ya.